Hello, and thank you for joining us today in our study of the book of Psalms. Today we're in Psalm 26, and in this psalm, David is crying out for God's judgment. Now, while that may seem a little bit strange, what you really have is a situation where, at least under what we see in this psalm, David is having accusations that are leveled against him, things that he is having to try to defend about his character and about his integrity. And so he calls upon God to, as verse 1 is going to state, vindicate him. And it's a very interesting premise that David is going to lay out. And there's some very strong lessons for us and some very interesting lessons for us to be found in this psalm. So let's see what we find in Psalm 26. Beginning in verse 1, we read these words: Vindicate me, O Lord, for I have walked in my integrity. I have also trusted in the Lord. I shall not slip. Examine me, O Lord, and prove me. Try my mind and my heart. For your loving kindness is before my eyes. I have walked in your truth. I have not sat with idolatrous mortals, nor will I go in with hypocrites. I have hated the assembly of evildoers, and will not sit with the wicked. I will wash my hands in innocence, so I will go about your altar, O Lord, that I may proclaim with the voice of thanksgiving and tell of all your wondrous works. O Lord, I have loved the habitation of your house, and the place where your glory dwells. Do not gather my soul with sinners, nor my life with bloodthirsty men, in whose hands is a sinister scheme, and whose right hand is full of bribes. But as for me, I will walk in my integrity. Redeem me, and be merciful to me. My foot stands in an even place. In the congregations I will bless the Lord. Here in Psalm 26, David calls upon God to vindicate him or to judge him, to see whether or not what David is claiming is true. And it would be found and it would be understood that it is true about David. But let's look at some of the things that David says when he makes this call to God, because most people don't want to be judged by God. Most people don't want God to be looking at them to see whether or not what they're doing is right. Because most people know that they're doing things that are wrong. And this is not David stating that he is perfect, but rather that his purpose, his intent, and as he's going to put it a couple of times, his integrity is where it's supposed to be and is in doing what it is that he's supposed to do. Notice what we have in Psalm 26. Beginning in verse 2, David is going to call upon God to examine him. And he tells him to put him to the test, to try his mind and his heart. And then he's going to give some evidence of where his heart lies. He says in verse 4, I have not sat with idolatrous mortals. I will not go in with hypocrites. I have hated the assembly of evildoers. I will not sit with the wicked. I will wash my hands in innocence, so that I may proclaim with the voice of thanksgiving and tell of all your wondrous works. In other words, I am fully and completely devoted to you. In a day and in a time when the idolatrous actions of offering sacrifices to many gods and things of that nature is relatively common in many parts of Israel and has been for centuries at this point. You have a situation where David says, look at me and look at my life, look at the choices that I'm making, and notice that I am fully invested in you. And that certainly needs to be something that we are looking at and we are asking ourselves is where, if God is to examine us, and he does, If God is to put our hearts to the test, where does He find us being invested? As a matter of fact, it goes into the second statement that I want us to look at in verse number 8, where there David is going to say, Lord, I have loved the house of, or the habitation of your house and the place where your glory dwells. He says, the place that I love is the place where you are, the place of your house. If we were to have to answer the question, what do we love? If God were to examine us to notice what it is that we actually love, what would it be? Would it be our job? Would it be our sports? Would it be our vacations? Is the place that we love the place where we can go to get away from it all, even God? What is it that we would be found to love? David says, I have loved the habitation of your house. And then he says in verse 9, do not gather my soul with sinners, nor my life with bloodthirsty men, in whose hands is a sinister scheme, and whose right hand is full of bribes. Don't lump me in with those kinds of people, because my joy is found in your house. David's heart is with doing what God wants him to do. Is he perfect? By no means. But his desire is to do what is right. And then in the third place, you drop down to the final verse, or rather to verse 11. And there in verse 11 he says, but as for me, I will walk in my integrity. Redeem me and be merciful to me. I will walk in my integrity. I know that the actions that I'm undertaking are the right actions, and I will stand by them, is the essence of what David is saying. Therefore, put me to the test and vindicate me. As we look at our lives, can we honestly ask God to put us to the test? To examine the lives that we lead and the things that we do, and to come to a judgment on us. Is that really what we want by the way that we live our lives? It should be, because it will be. We should be living our lives in such a way that we welcome the occasion for God to examine what it is we're doing and the choices that we're making, because ultimately we are going to be judged by Him for the things that we do in our lives. And so if we would not want God looking at our lives, there are some things that we need to change, because we are not living in integrity, and it will cost us eventually. Maybe not now, maybe not here, but it will in all eternity. These are some of the things that I found in Psalm 26. I hope that they are beneficial to you. Next time we'll come back and we will examine Psalm 27. I hope you'll join us then. But until then, have a great day.